absolutely my favorite day of the year. Look around, feel the energy before we even started today. This is what the region was all about. The human capacity that's in this district is absolutely second to none, and you can feel it. Like, this is the one time all year that we're together, and I've said this is my 9th convocation at this point in time, and I've said this a few times. That's like 10,000 years in real life for superintendent, but the stability here is what makes that possible, and it's from a good board, it's from a great community, and it's from an awesome faculty and staff. So that's why we have consistency in this place, and I think that's one of the things that sets us apart. Before I do anything, though, when you go back to your buildings today, do me the favor and please thank our buildings and grounds folks for everything they did over the summer. You can see your reflection in the floor, and our buildings are busy during the summer, and so that's an awful lot of work that goes into making our facilities look the way they do. And we looked at it this past summer. The budget through which we get all that work done over the summer is literally about a fifth of what it was less than 10 years ago. So that's how we're making that work, and those men and women really work their tails off all summer long, and I'm really proud of the work that they do. And for those that don't know, every year before the school starts, you know, I go around with Mr. Boyce throughout every building. We literally walk sort of every inch of every building, and the B&G folks show us all the work that was done over the summer, and the pride that those women and men take in what they do in these buildings is second to none, and I think that's something that sets us apart. Couple things. I want to do something a little different this year, just because I was looking at numbers, right? And so I started here in 2011, and 36% of the people that are sitting in this room right now have been hired since I've been superintendent, which is like a huge chunk. But what I'd like to do first is, if you're someone that has worked for the Freehold Regional High School District for more than 20 years, stand up. So something really interesting happened this past year, and I'm sure most of you are aware, but in case you're not all aware, Forbes magazine, right, named the Freehold Regional High School District one of the best employers in the state of New Jersey. Now, the interesting piece to that is we were sandwiched between like Amazon and Costco, right? And, true, and there were, the list went 100 deep of employers in the state of New Jersey. There was no other public school on the list. And I was also MVP in the 8th grade also. So, you know, every year I dread coming up on stage, because if you haven't ever stared out at 1,000 people looking back at you, it's a little bit intimidating. It's, you know, I woke up at 1:45 last night, and that was it. You know, I was up and sort of nervous, and but the reason I keep continuing to do that is that I think it's incredibly important for me to stand in front of you every school year, and at least articulate the things that are driving the district, the things that are driving me as superintendent of this place, and I think I owe you that. And so I get up and do it, but I want you to know I hate it. You know, it's stressful. It's like the last 2 weeks of the summer, you know, I sort of lose sleep over it. But every year that I do it, I'm glad that I did, because I think it's too easy in an organization this size to just sort of pass the buck and have other people explain things or other people say things for you. And I think that it's important to model just sort of owning that and it's, you know, showing my vulnerability, coming out in front of everyone, because it's stress-inducing, and it wipes out like the last couple weeks of my summer every year, but it's so important to me. So, you know, we've themed this day in the past, and there's been all sorts of themes that we've done with the Convocation. We've talked about all students, right? Which is, I'll go back to that in a little bit, but what the concept of all really means. We've talked about how we use our time that we're gifted to work with the children that come before us. We've talked about change and what that means to sort of look forward and embrace that rather than clinging to the past. So we've talked about collaboration and what that means. So every year there's a theme behind what we do. And one of the things that I said last year, I talked about a little bit the difference between motivation and inspiration, and something that I had heard from Teresa Witherspoon, who was a WNBA All-Star. And one of the things that she had pointed out was, you know, to motivate someone is great, that's terrific, but it's temporary. If you inspire someone, that lasts for a lifetime. And so the goal in the Convocation is always to sort of try and inspire the collective capacity of the group. And this year's going to be, this is a tough message this year, because there's a lot going on that I'm gonna discuss with you. But I hope that we can look forward in an inspirational way, regardless of where we are. And so, as you walked in today, we had some mountain imagery. You know, some of you might remember I like an image to kind of like anchor my talk, and we've used lighthouses and seascapes and reflections and things in the past. But this year it was mountains, and the reason I chose mountains, and thank you, Mr. Diaz threw in a bunch of his slides from Chile, which is absolutely beautiful. But there's a lot of interesting concepts with a mountain that I think resonate with what's happening with us as a school district. So first off, when you climb a mountain, right? There's lots of different. There's no one way to the top. You can scale it directly, and it could be incredibly difficult, but you can still get there. You can use switchbacks, right, to make it a little bit easier, but you can still get to the top. But you don't. One of the things you don't do is go into the mountains alone, right? You do it together. And there's a lot of times on that journey, if you're climbing a mountain, where you cannot see the summit necessarily. You cannot see a valley. You cannot see the pathway, the easiest way to get there. You have to sort of discover that. And I think that's a little bit of the path that we're on here in the school system, because there's a lot of unknown that we're going to face over the next couple of years. But I do think that there are paths that we're going to take. We're going to have to take them together. I think that the answer is certainly unknown of how we're going to get to that summit, but I think we will get there, and I think that we will overcome the adversity that faces this place, and I think that what's most important is the only way we're going to do that is if we do it together, and if the folks in this room absolutely stick together in all of this, because there's some real interesting unknowns ahead of us. And I think that's, many of you know, I'm a Calvin and Hobbes fan, and I think one of the reasons I love Calvin and Hobbes the most, and I don't know if you know the backstory on the gentleman who's the Calvin and Hobbes creator, but he did sort of what Andrew Luck just did from the NFL. He walked away on top. So he had this unbelievably successful comic strip, and when he was I think about 10 years ago now, he just walked away from it. And he said, I could have milked it for another 5, 6, 7 years. I could have made a lot of money. He goes, but I don't think it would have been as good as it is. And so I'm going to leave it in this moment in time. And then there's a great quote, and I think it's terrific advice for what we do as educators, right? We spend all of our time looking ahead and worrying, looking back sometimes to how things used to be, and we're not present. And being present is incredibly important because there's no other profession like public ed where you have the opportunity to be present every single day, every single period, and do it differently, right? You can change on a dime. And every summer I go camping with my son, and the best question that he asked me this summer, we climbed up on a little summit in the Appalachian Trail, and it was quiet, and it was peaceful, and we're just looking out at the Delaware Water Gap, and it's beautiful. And he said, "Dad, what day is today?" And I thought that was the most powerful question because, there's a great quote that say, children are not encumbered with a past or a future, and thus they're able to enjoy the present like very few adults can. And we need to be present, right? And as all this, financial news and schools and everything swirls around us, I think we need to ground ourselves in the fact that every new period, every single day, we have an opportunity to just be great. And we have an opportunity to try it again, over and over and over again. And that's very different than other professions. But that only starts with really being present and living in the moment. And so one of the things that I'd like to challenge the group to think about for this school year is just ground yourselves in being present. And so every day is not going to go great. Every lesson is not going to go great. But, in a world where we are 10 times more likely to pay attention to negative news than positive news, I think it's incredibly important to embrace the moment. And, as kids come in front of us on a daily basis, that's their moment, and then they're gone. And so I think we owe it to them to be present and to embrace the moment and not to worry about the things that, to address the things that are coming, but not to be consumed by them. And I've said this before, Tom Petty has a great line that says, most of the things I worry about never happen anyway. But we spend so much time fixated either looking forward or looking back. We have real opportunities every single day to be great. So take them. A couple of things about where we are as a school system and the financial system that is out there in New Jersey. And I want to make sure that everyone in this room has a firm understanding of what's happening in the state of New Jersey, right? And so a brief little synopsis. Senate Bill 2 was passed last year, fundamentally changed how schools are funded in New Jersey. There were a number of districts who were truly underfunded during the Christie years. So for an 8-year period, while their populations exploded, everyone was held flat. And so that was less for those school districts. And we, as an organization, advocated that those school systems deserved more aid for their children. Because I cannot imagine that any legislature would want to educate one child at the expense of another in a state as prosperous as we are, right? That blows my mind. So we were out in front of this. We looked at the funding situation. We knew that there was a chance that they might change it. We have a slightly declining population, but I want to dispel some myths. Myth number one out there is that districts that have a declining population have somehow lived high on the hog and hid all this money for years, right? The truth of that is we've lost probably about 1,000 students over the past 12 years. But if every single one of those students came back today, we would still be dramatically underfunded. It's a myth. It's a soundbite, right? It's not accurate. So we were, as early as 3 years ago, testifying before the Senate Ed Committee, the Assembly, that you have to look at this funding. The numbers don't add up. And I'll give you a little context for the Freehold Regional High School District. From, I think it's around 2012 to 2017, our property wealth grew here about 9% or so in the region. But the state's determination of what we should pay, our ability to pay, increased by over 50%. It does not add up. So we have attacked this, and I use the term fight, right? We have attacked this vigorously on a number of fronts that I want the group to understand. First and foremost, through advocacy. So we have met with every single elected official that represents this area. We have provided regular briefing packets on our financial situation and countered these myths to every single elected official within this area. We have met with the Commissioner of Ed and his staff on multiple occasions. We have met with the governor's staff on multiple occasions. We have sued the state. We are part of the lawsuit that's suing the state over the funding formula. So we have taken dramatic action over the past couple of years. But I'm going to challenge everybody in this room, especially those of you, of which there are a significant number who live within our geographic footprint. You have to own it as well. Because what's afoot for the school system long term is a very, very unsustainable end. And if you live here, and if you pay property taxes here, and if you have children here, you've got to fight tooth and nail, and you do that by educating your elected officials, educating your neighbors about what's really happening, paying attention to what's occurring from Trenton. And last year, we were careful when we put the Ensuring Excellence referendum out to the community. We did not tie that to our financial situation. And that was intentional, because we did not want the community to feel that we were simply putting out this referendum to band-aid, a financial situation. The truth is that the referendum is just one little piece of a lot of things that have to occur to correct our financial situation, but it's a very important piece. And there has been one time in my 25 years in public education that I cried over something that was work-related. And when the referendum here went down in March, I teared up because I was so upset that the community didn't understand the importance of that referendum in the larger context of what was happening. What I was more upset about was in a population that had, somewhere north of 100,000 people that could vote, 7,000 in total even came out to vote. And 4,000 no votes determined the fate of that referendum in a geographic footprint with over 200,000 residents. So I was dismayed and disappointed, teared up, didn't sleep, and came in and said, we're gonna go back out, and we're gonna try things a little bit differently. And so this year we're going out on election day. There will be a ton of information that's forthcoming. But for those of you who live within our footprint, you have to help us carry this. You have to help us get the information out about the referendum itself, because we listened to feedback, and so we separated it in questions. The truth of the matter is that the things that are being done, especially in question 1, have to come to be done within the next couple of years no matter what. And so we waited deliberately until the debt came off the books from the construction of Colts Neck High School in 1998, 20-year debt. We waited so that we can put this out to the community and say, there will be no tax increase as a result of this. You will not see an increase, because we took all that debt And we're repurposing 2/3 of it, and we're giving 1/3 back to the taxpayers. We think that's incredibly responsible. What I would challenge folks to do in this room is to go online, educate yourselves, understand what's happening. If there's something you're not sure about, ask. You know, we'll be happy to tell you. There'll be a full-on media blitz in the next couple of weeks over that. You know, both videos, and we put out a lot of information. We're waiting for final state numbers. And the other piece to the referendum is we have to do that work anyway. If we pass the referendum, the state will pay, we anticipate, for somewhere around 25% of the cost of that project. If we have to do it on our own, then that 25% we pay for as well. So my challenge to everyone here is to understand the context that we're working in as a school system over the next couple of years. And to educate yourselves about what that means. And then to educate your friends and neighbors and family members and to advocate for positive change. I don't, you know, when I look at finding opportunity during adversity, one of the things I think about, we have an opportunity to change the way the state even looks at how they're funding all schools. Because I don't think that our kids should be funded at the expense of some other child in some other community. Not at all. But I do know that when the state is committing $20 million to horse racing and things of that nature, that they should be funneling that money to their schools. Right? And so my challenge to you is to embrace that, especially those of you who live within our footprint. And there are hundreds of you that live within the context of this school system. And the easiest soundbite that anyone can embrace is it cost us about $3,500 less than similar districts to provide everything that we provide for kids in this system. $3,500 per child. We are literally one of the most efficient school systems in the state of New Jersey when you look at cost and return on investment. In our category, we're top 3 or 4 in every single financial metric. That's a soundbite worth sharing with the larger community. And as we challenge sort of the status quo over the next couple of years, we are going to have to think outside the box. But everybody in this room needs to understand we've already been thinking outside the box, right? And that's a little bit cliche, but in 2012, this school system was one of the first public schools in the state of New Jersey to go through an energy savings improvement plan, where we bonded ourselves a $20-some-odd million project at no cost to the taxpayers to upgrade our HVAC, our boiler systems, some of our roofing, and all of that. As a matter of fact, we were so far out in front of the curve there that the RFP that we put together, right, for that project was what the state organization latched onto to use for subsequent projects, right? We received a $500,000 grant, a CTE grant, to expand career pathways. Started at Borough, expanding the township, and expand out to other high schools. $500,000, right, to be able to do our web design, our health professions. We have 1,500 students already in the magnet program. We have close to 1,500 students taking dual enrollment courses for Brookdale. When we needed to devise a better schedule for kids, we built our own block schedule off of the existing schedule that gave us more instructional time and more prep time, right? Like, we're out in front of it in terms of maximizing what we do here. And so it's going to be challenging the next couple of years, but I think that if we stick together on this and we help each other and we collaborate the way we always have, we're going to continue to find solutions to what's in front of us. And that's what we're going to have to do. So we had a leadership retreat like we do every summer, and one of the things that we talked about was anytime that you're moving forward to make something better, right, from point A to point B, one of the things that you have to have is sort of a sense of urgency, right, that things can be better. We can improve this. The collective organization really needs to embrace the fact that there is something we can move to that's better than where we are. But it starts with us, and the why behind what we're doing has not changed in 9 years. It's clear. It's like, what do we do for all students? How do we support them? How do we provide opportunities? And then how do we make sure that we continue to identify students that can be challenged in different ways? But it starts with us, right? And whatever catchphrase, we came up with a couple catchphrases at the leadership retreat, but it's been the same since 2011. And I think that's important for folks to understand. And it's not just about kids taking advanced placement courses. It's about the in-class support kid that is taking their first gen ed class. It's about the resource student who's taking their first ICR class. It's about the kid who takes their first honors class. And there have been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids that have benefited as a result of that, right? But when we look at it, we can always do better. We're a large organization. So there are, 10,600 or so students here, and you're about to go out and touch all of those kids over the next year, right? And I don't think that any of those students at age 14 or 15 are who they're going to be as adults yet. But it's our job to help unearth that. And if I sort of superimpose your 15-year-old self, right, on who you are now and judged you by your 15-year-old self, would everybody in this room be comfortable with that? I'm asking. If you are, let me know. We're going to bring you up here, then we're going to get your yearbook photo out. We're going to have a little fun. Because we all grow, right? And the challenge that we have is, what is our sense of urgency to just get better and better and better and connect with more and more kids? One of the things that we talked about that I've asked the administration to take a look at this year is fewer emails, right? I'm tired of emails. All right, don't freak out when you get an email, all right? But seriously, think about it. We use email to communicate in ways that it was never intended to do. How we communicate what we're doing for kids, there's nothing better than communicating that directly, person to person, no matter what that is. Right? And if anybody, I was going to show it now, but I decided against it, but there's a great clip, if any of you have seen it, called Email in Real Life, where folks in an office talk to each other like they're emails, and it shows sort of the absurdity of email communication and what it looks like. Watch it if you have a moment, because I think that when we're trying to do great things for kids, email convolutes that sometimes, and how we communicate convolutes that. And anytime there's a larger issue that sort of comes to my office, and I go through like the electronic communication before it landed on my desk, there are so many opportunities where I say, oh my God, if somebody just talked to each other right here, none of this would be happening. Or right here, or right here, but we keep going. There's a good spoof on that where two guys are texting each other and how they interpret their text. It's not PG rated, so I can't share it here, but the ability for electronic communication to be misinterpreted, I think, undermines sometimes the positive things that we're doing for kids. Last year was the frogs. If anybody remembers the two frogs that were trying to jump out of a hole, and the one makes it out after not being able to hear the other folks telling him, the other frogs telling him he's never going to make it out. But I put a sea turtle up here. There's a great talk from Brene Brown, who talks about vulnerability. And one of the things that she says about students is that students come to us like turtles without their shells, completely vulnerable in some ways. And she makes the argument that if you don't feel vulnerable, you can't truly be as creative or innovative or engaged in the way that you could possibly be if you have some sort of shell up around you, right? And I think that over time, we all develop shells, right? One of the most interesting statistics that she put out there is that 85% of folks surveyed can name an individual that made them, in their educational experience, that made them question their own worth, made them question their own intelligence, made them question their own capacity. They can name them, right? On the flip side of that, 90%, and I'm sure, there's probably a huge chunk of you out there, myself included, can name one individual who actually transformed how they view themselves and their own capacity and their own intelligence and their own ability, right? So 85% have this traumatic experience here, and 90% have this transformative experience here. All from teachers, right? That's the paradox of the profession. We can cut both ways. We have the power to cut both ways. Now, I've been out of school for a long time, and some of you maybe have not as long, but I can tell you that most of the folks that educated me, I remember here and there, but I remember like a blinding light, the folks that empowered me and the folks that made me question myself and my own ability. Like a blinding light. I could tell you the grade, the name, who they were, what they looked like, how their mannerisms in the classroom, both ways, right? So that's the kind of power you're walking out of this room with for the year. Every single person in this room has the power to be one of those individuals. Be the 90%. It's simple. And so as kids come to us, and as they're vulnerable, as we go through our own learning and our own life experiences, right, our shell hardens. And Brene Brown refers it to as trauma, but it's not trauma like, in the truest sense of, you're traumatized. It's these little things that happen that make you put up a little bit of a shell, right? And if you just remember that when those students are sitting in front of you, and remember your own 15-year-old self, and your own insecurities, and your own struggles, it might lend itself to just connecting with those students a little bit more and making sure that we're always on that 90% side and never on that 85% side. And if you haven't had the chance to see the talk, she did the talk at South by Southwest in 2017. It's only about 30 minutes. I highly recommend it. She's done some terrific research, and it dovetails to what I said earlier about vulnerability and relational trust and making yourself vulnerable in a way that allows folks to truly connect with you and educate kids in the truest sense. And it's a powerful, powerful talk. Along those lines, I want to share just a brief clip by a gal by the name of Amy Mullins. Amy Mullins is the first amputee in America to be a Division I track athlete. She is has now turned into, she's a speaker, but she's also an actress. For those of you who are Stranger Things fans, right, which I'm a bowl-cutted, D&D playing 80s kid, right? So I love those kids. She plays Eleven's mom in the chair. But she gave a talk about her own experience. And so she was born with a terrible birth defect, had both of her legs amputated at the knee at the age of 1, and ends up becoming a Division I track athlete at Georgetown University and qualifying for the Paralympics in 1996. And I just want to share a little bit about from her story, and we'll talk after.
I think the greatest adversity that we've created for ourselves is this idea of normalcy. And who's normal? There's no normal. There's common, there's typical, there's no normal. And would you want to meet that poor beige person if they existed? I don't think so. If we can change this paradigm from one of achieving normalcy to one of possibility or potency, to be even a little bit more dangerous, we can release the power of so many more children and invite them to engage their rare and valuable abilities with the community. Anthropologists tell us that the one thing we as humans have always required of our community members is to be of use, to be able to contribute. There's evidence that Neanderthals 60,000 years ago carried their elderly and those with serious physical injury. And perhaps it's because the life experience of survival of these people proved of value to the community. They didn't view these people as broken and useless. They were seen as rare and valuable. A few years ago, I was in a food market in the town where I grew up, in that red zone in northeastern Pennsylvania. And I was standing over a bushel of tomatoes. It was summertime, I had shorts on. I hear this guy, his voice behind me, say, "Well, if it isn't Amy Mullins." And I turn around, and it's this older man, I have no idea who he is. And I said, "I'm sorry, sir, have we met? I don't remember meeting you." He said, "Well, you wouldn't remember meeting me. I mean, when we met, I was delivering you from your mother's womb." Oh, that guy. And of course, actually, it did click. This man was Dr. Keene, a man that I had only known about through my mother's stories of that day. Because, of course, typical fashion, I arrived late for my birthday by 2 weeks. And so my mother's prenatal physician had gone on vacation. So the man who delivered me was a complete stranger to my parents. And because I was born without the fibula bones and had feet turned in and a few toes in this foot and a few toes in that, he had to be the bearer, the stranger had to be the bearer of bad news. He said to me, "I had to give this prognosis to your parents that you would never walk and you would never have the kind of mobility that other kids have or any kind of life of independence, and you've been making a liar out of me ever since." The extraordinary thing is that he said he had saved newspaper clippings throughout my whole childhood, whether winning a second grade spelling bee, marching with the Girl Scouts, the Halloween parade, winning my college scholarship, or any of my sports victories. And he was using it and integrating it into teaching resident students, med students from Hahnemann Medical School and Hershey Medical School. And he called this part of the course the X Factor. It was the potential of the human will. No prognosis can account for how powerful this could be as a determinant in the quality of someone's life. And Dr. Keene went on to tell me that, he said, "In my experience, unless repeatedly told otherwise, and even if given a modicum of support, if left to their own devices, a child will achieve." See, Dr. Keene made that shift in thinking. He understood that there's a difference between the medical condition and what someone might do with it. And there's been a shift in my thinking over time, in that if you had asked me at 15 years old, if I would have traded prosthetics for flesh and bone legs, I wouldn't have hesitated for a second. I aspired to that kind of normalcy back then. But if you ask me today, I'm not so sure. And it's because of the experiences I've had with them, not in spite of the experiences I've had with them. And perhaps this shift in me has happened because I've been exposed to more people who have opened doors for me than those who have put lids and cast shadows on me. See, all you really need is one person to show you the epiphany of your own power, and you're off. If you can hand somebody the key to their own power, the human spirit is so receptive. If you can do that and open a door for someone at a crucial moment, you are educating them in the best sense. You're teaching them to open doors for themselves. In fact, the exact meaning of the word educate comes from the root word educe. It means to bring forth what is within, to bring out potential. So again, which potential do we want to bring out? There was a case study done in 1960s Britain when they were moving from grammar schools to comprehensive schools. It's called the streaming trials. We call it tracking here in the States. It's separating students from A, B, C, D, and so on. And the A students get the tougher curriculum, the best teachers, etc. Well, they took over a 3-month period, D-level students, gave them A's, told them they were A's, told them they were bright, and at the end of this 3-month period, they were performing at A level. And of course, the heartbreaking flip side of this study is that they took the A students and told them they were D's. And that's what happened at the end of that 3-month period. Those who were still around in school, besides the people had dropped out. This is the crucial part of this case study, was that the teachers were duped too. The teachers didn't know a switch had been made. They were simply told, these are the A students, these are the D students, and that's how they went about teaching them and treating them. So I think that the only true disability is a crushed spirit.
So a couple things, right? I love how she goes into to educate in the truest sense means to bring forth. And I think what I'm challenging everybody to keep in the front of your mind all year is that there's so much to be brought forth from the typical teenager who's going to be sitting in your classroom and exposed to something for the first time. There's so much that hasn't been tapped into in some way. And there are real opportunities every single day. And I love this statement, one person to release the epiphany of your own power. If I asked all of you to think of a moment when you realized you were better at something than you thought you were smarter than you thought you were, you had more capacity than you thought you did, right? We have those sort of touchstone moments in our life, but they're incredible moments because they literally can put you on one pathway or another. And we've talked about labels and the power of labeling and what that does to students, but also what it does for the adult expectations of those students, right? So when you have students in your classroom, they're just kids. They're just kids. And the irony of all of this, right, is that somewhere around 70% of your standardized test performance is going to be explained by your parents' wealth and your parents' level of education. Now that sounds like a lot, but that means there's this whole other chunk that's untapped, right? And so the student who's not having those conversations at the dinner table, the student who doesn't have mom and dad hovering over them to make sure their homework is done appropriately, the student that doesn't have mommy write the summer essay, right? That student may have all the potential in the world in a particular subject or particular avenue. It just hasn't been brought forth yet. And let's stop approaching our classrooms from a deficit model, right? When we approach it like by what kids don't know, rather than what we can pull forth from them, think of the difference in even looking at it that way. So if I gave everybody a multiple choice test now, so I was a social studies guy, I'd give you all a multiple choice test on World War II. See how you did. What you don't know, if I focused on what you didn't know, I'm doing you a disservice rather than focusing on what I might be able to pull forth from the group that we can really engage in some real learning. But most importantly, I think that when that gets hammered over and over and over again, that's when folks don't understand their own power. And we all have our own experiences to draw from. We all went to school. We all sat in a classroom. And we all had people that pulled it out of us or made us sort of shrink back in with it. And that's where real vulnerability comes from. And I think that a kid who is willing to take risk in your classroom and is brave because you create those conditions for that student to be brave. But you also have to remember how quickly you can add to that shell. It's really easy to just chink student shells. I hear it all the time. I'm dealing with it personally. My oldest is a freshman now and in high school, engaged in that for the first time. And I hear her friends say, oh, I can't do that. I'm not good at that. No, I'm bad at that subject. I don't know that. And I literally go, well, why do you think that? That's always my question. Well, I just don't do well. And those kids know somebody along the way just hasn't tapped into that. And that doesn't mean we're all going to be graded in all subjects, and kids are going to sit before you and just do everything you ask of them and do it really well. It just means that you have an opportunity, if you live in the moment, right? If you're present every day, to potentially unearth things that you might miss. And what an awesome opportunity that is. And wouldn't you want your own children to go to a place where you knew all the adults were thinking about how they can pull out what your child has to offer? I have 4 of my own. They're incredibly different. Some school comes easy, some school does not come easy. But they all have different abilities and different powers, right? And what I've loved most is watching the adults be able to pull that from all 4 of them. And the adults who can do that really stand out in much the same way that we remember them. So let me ask you one other thing. If I asked you within 5 seconds to name one teacher who changed the trajectory of how you thought about yourself, and you can name them right now, stand up. And I guarantee you that you can name that teacher, you can name the subject, right? Now, like the last guy sitting, he's like, I gotta get up. Right? But seriously, that's the power of this room. You're about to go do that for 10,600 kids. You can be that person. If we're all on the 90% of things, we're going to change kids' lives. It's an awesome opportunity. There is no other district like this place. It's a high school only district, right? And there are so many benefits to that, but it's challenging, right? The kids come to us in 9th grade from 7 different places, and we have 4 years with them. But that's so many bites at the apple if we're living in the moment, day to day, period to period. If we're really focused on continual improvement, and we are truly committing to it, it's not that difficult. We have the capacity. So if all of you who just stood up and did that, imagine if at the end of this year, 10 kids named you like that. Then grow that out. Look at what you've done. Look what you've done with your life if you're doing that, right? That's why this is the best job in the world, right? That's why we all went into this. There's nothing like it. Nobody can connect to that. I talk to all my friends who live in different worlds and work in different worlds, and they do not have the satisfaction of empowering children and changing lives. We have that satisfaction. It is a deep satisfaction. It's a purposeful life, right? And there's nothing better than that. So we're gonna recognize the Teachers of the Year momentarily, but I want to say I am so proud and humbled to be the superintendent of this school district. It's been the most rewarding time of my life professionally to work here and to work with you and to do the things that we do for kids. And I have said it, what's driving me crazy now is you know, every time I see another place, I just want to fix it, sort of the way we do things, which is not always healthy, right? But there has been no more rewarding time in my life than I'm into my 9th year here now. And I hope that we continue to do what we've done for kids, that we find that adversity, that we fight that adversity and find opportunity with what we're about to face. And I'm challenging everyone here to just understand where we're headed and where we came from, but to live in the moment this year. Live in the moment with the students in your classroom that you can connect to, and have an awesome 2019-2020.